we were driving, and I knew it was coming. Like, I just knew, I could tell on him that he knew. And so he pulled the car over, and he said, don't you ever do that again, man. And just, it's crazy because I can still feel the exact horrifying feelings of what ending your life feels like. And in his way, he just letting me know that he cared. He's like, I called you, I texted you, man, I told you could come to my house and live there if you needed. And I ignored all of it. I disregarded all attempts of people trying to help me. And but when he did that, like, it was just the way he said it was like, cut through all the bullshit, and it was just straight talk, real love, brother to brother. And he's like, don't you ever do that again. And it wasn't about me attempting. He was like, don't you ever, never, like, come talk to me first.
All right, guys, welcome to another episode of the Mediocre Dads podcast, where being mediocre is a choice, and you have to be mediocre every single day. I'm your host, Queon. I go by Q, and I am joined by a phenomenal guest. I came across him on Instagram, and he was on another podcast. And forgive me, I do not remember the name of the other podcast. All I knew was I saw you, and I was like, I have to reach out to this dude. So, like, I got your information, and went to your Instagram, clicked on your link, and it said contact, and sent the email. I was like, before I forget, I need to contact this dude and reach out. So I was super excited, and I was super excited because we were able to meet up sooner rather than later on. And so I'm super excited for this episode. It being Men's Mental Health Awareness Month, I think he's the perfect person to have this conversation with. And I think you're the perfect individual to really dive into the nitty gritty of it. Because as we were saying before, is people need to see the deeper side of men to better understand what's going on, versus this facade of, like, I'm tough and I have nothing going on, this postal exterior where you're just toughness and you don't have any weaknesses. So I think this is going to be a really great conversation. But before we get too deep into it, guys, please subscribe to the channel, Mediocre Dads. It means a lot, and to grow the channel, and it's the best way to support the channel. And before we get too deep into any further, my guest name is Jason. Jason, and I would like you to just introduce yourself and tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, thank you so much, Q, for having me.
Absolutely.
I got your message. I think it came in late or early in the morning on my through my website email, and I got it the next morning and read through it. And then same thing, I checked out your YouTube, and I really liked your approach to conversation. And I said I had to be a part of this, man, because it's right up my alley. So my name is Jason Tyler McLean. I am from Winnipeg in Canada. So I'm like right in the dead center of the prairies in the middle of the country. It is the hottest and coldest part of the planet. Just so you're aware.
I didn't know that.
Like minus 50 here, like the same temperature on Mars in the winter, and like plus 30, 40. So it's smoking hot here. So I'm 53 years old, and I am a big mental health speaker, author, an educator. My whole life now, my purpose is getting in front of as many human beings as I can, men, women, even kids. I speak at schools, and I'm promoting all different sides of the story regarding mental health. Myself, I'm a suicide attempt survivor. In 2019, I put a gun in my mouth, disengaged the safety, pulled the trigger with all intent of ending my pain. I didn't want to end my life. I wanted to end my suffering, my pain, my loneliness, my addictions, all the things that were not me, but were, the contributing factors into my state of depression and all these things. That gun jammed. It was a brand new firearm, and the odds of that is like 1 in millions
Yeah.
for that to happen. So I was given a second chance in 2019, and with that second chance, you know what? I had to learn how to live again. I had to rewrite my own story completely from scratch. Like I had lost everything, man. I was bankrupt, emotionally bankrupt, mentally bankrupt, spiritually bankrupt. I was done. I had nothing. It was during COVID. Everything was locked down, isolation. I was completely alone, and it couldn't have been a better formula for my success because I was forced to face all the demons. I was forced to fight for my life, and I started writing everything down. And I actually, like, you're a military man, and I respect that with everything. And I became like a Navy SEAL in my approach to my life and my mental health, my physical health, spiritual, and I just attacked everything. I created these things I called battle plans every day, and they saved my life. And so I ended up getting stronger and stronger. And I just started, much like we were talking about earlier, I just want to know everything. I want to learn everything. And so I was watching speakers and listening to talks and audiobooks and reading and just like just a sponge. And I was taking everything taking everything in I could to learn how to win this battle against mental health, mental illness, mental disorders, all the different aspects of it. And when I started writing everything out, I've always been a good creative writer, even when I was like a young kid. I was horrible and bad in school, but I could write these incredible stories. And so I started writing everything out, and I decided I wanted to write a book. And I wrote my first book. It was called One Drop of Water. And I'll just show you here. I have one here. So this is my first book that came out. And so this book, um, it was a wild ride. Writing it. It took me over a year and a half almost, and I poured my whole life into this book. And it's vulnerable, it's raw, it's honest. I talk about being, sexually molested and abused, physically abused as a child, neglected, abandoned, all the things, and then being homeless and living on the streets as a teenager and joining gangs and all the things I did throughout my life that kept me in a state of chaos and self-harm. And but when I wrote this book, as I was writing it, it was an incredibly cathartic, therapeutic experience for me, and it helped heal me as I was doing it. And I had the intention in mind while writing it that at least one other person is going to read this book, and it's going to help them change. And I released it into the wild, or into the public, and man, it went crazy. It blew up like fireworks in the dark skies of mental health. And within a couple of years, I had been on, like 50 different podcasts. I had been, on the news. I had been speaking all over the place and helping thousands of people all over. Like, I actually have a pretty big following in the States, and it was crazy. And to know that, to have that kind of impact, like from putting yourself out there and being honest and raw. And as a man, it's extremely vulnerable, exposing all the weaknesses I could in this book. And so that just kind of threw me into this world where all of a sudden I was able to start educating other people and helping everything from organizations create safety plans for mental health in their workplace, suicide prevention. I took this assist training so I could help de-escalate people in suicidal situations, like crazy stuff. And
Yeah.
it's been an incredible wild ride. So that's that side of me, and that's led now into my second book, and again, more and more just growth and exposure all over the place globally, actually, now, which is wild. And but on a personal level, I'm a family man. I'm married, and I have two stepsons, and an amazing dog, and love my life. I'm a very nature based guy. Love the outdoors. I'm in the gym 6 days a week, 2 hours every morning, up at 5:30, kind of thing. Eat clean. My wife is a trainer and does nutrition plans and all that. So I'm pretty. She keeps me in line there, which is great. I try to sneak the odd cookie in here and there and get in trouble, but I go to church when I can, and I'm outside all the time in nature. Like I said, I'm always looking to improve my position in life, whether it's spiritually, mentally, physically. This for me, it's a no game approach, right? There's no free time, man. There's just lifetime, and so that's who I am. Kind of broken down into a couple little compartments. Um, I fancy myself a pretty funny dude. I like pranking people, and I like to tell a lot of jokes and make a fool of myself to help benefit others and make people laugh. And then work wise, I do therapeutic work with children, and so I use a lot of nature based or eco therapy. It's called eco psychology based healing things with kids. I work with a lot of indigenous kids here and stuff, so they come from so sometimes some kind of challenged homes and some difficult situations. And so I go in there and try to create some mental wellness and a lot of programming and stuff and get them active and teach them ways to cope with life in a positive way. And I love what I do. Absolutely love what I do. So that's me, man.
That's awesome, man. Listen, I have had several guests on, right? Like I've had several guests on, but in to hear about your life in that synopsis, in which obviously in each moment that you've gone through, it's obviously there was time, right? There were years that were going by, right? But you, by far, you have to have one of the most interesting lives that I've come across, right? Because from where you started when you're telling us about your own personal experience with suicide to being like, well, hey, look, I go to the gym now, and it's great. Also, as my job, this is what it's, like I was like, oh my goodness, what haven't you done? Like,
Yeah.
and I think that's phenomenal, right? You're an author as well. Like these while these are worldly accomplishments, and these things, they mean a lot, right? Like they help us, but I think the value that you're getting from life in the grand scheme of things, I think that's one thing that I will commend you on, is because uh you know it takes a lot to get to where you are. Where I perceive where you are in a place of genuine peace and happiness, where you're just like, hey man, not every day's the best day, or some days are better than the other, but I'm just doing this life thing, and I'm having fun at it, and I think
Absolutely.
that's awesome, right? Because that's
Thank you.
few and far in between for a lot of people, right? Some of us, we will wake up to this 9 to 5 that we hate going to, and we convince ourselves we have to keep going there because of family ties or whatever the case might be, or we're not good enough, or we are confidence issues, whatever the case might be. But we always there's something convincing ourselves that we can't do what where we can't move past where we're at, and it can be crippling at times, because it can leave you in a place where you're like, I don't know where to go from here. But so I think it's phenomenal, right? And you said you're 53. I don't believe you.
Yeah.
So it's I really don't.
Yeah. Thanks, man. I
But
appreciate it.
yeah, but I'll take your word for it. So will
All the
the
kids I work
audience.
with think I'm 24 or something like that, so they get extra Dairy Queen or whatever anytime they tell me that. I'm like, let's go. But
There you go. Anybody
yeah,
listening that's one of his kids, hey, look, tell him he's 24 all the time. Dairy Queen's awesome. So,
yeah. No, that's cool.
but that's awesome, man. So I wanted to start. I think it's the perfect place to start is how you got here, right? Because we go through where we our beginning
Mm.
is it really helps paint a picture of some of the things the challenges we've encountered as we've grown up. So can you tell me a little bit about your dad, your parents growing up? What was life like for you?
Um, so I my mom and dad were together till I was about 7, and then they split up and got divorced. I had a younger sister at the time, who was 2 years younger than me, and there's all kinds of problems there. A lot of alcohol abuse and some violence in the house for sure. And so when they split, I lived with my dad. My sister went with my mom, and there was an ongoing custody battle between them. And I was used as a pawn a lot, and all that kind of ugly stuff that unfortunately happens in separation and divorces. And my dad, rest in peace and God bless his soul. He had a problem, some problems for sure. Very angry man, very
Mhm.
could be very violent. A lot of drinking, and he didn't know how to handle his emotions well, and so I got the brunt of it growing up a lot. Um, my mom, her and I have had an interesting relationship for sure, off and on. She's a sweet woman. She's great. She's had her challenges just like any other human being has. Our relationship now is outstanding. I talk to her all the time and that. But I think growing up through the childhood with them constantly battling and fighting and trying to hurt each other it was tough to go through.
Yeah.
My dad got married for the second time, and that woman was an absolute psychopath. She started, I could really tell she didn't like me because I was a reminder of my dad's previous life.
Mhm.
So she started like cutting up all like pictures out of me out of all the photo albums with my dad
Wow.
and like all this weird shit. And then like it just got really bad really fast. She started, telling me she was going to kill me and kill my sister. If we told on her for the things she was doing, and she would like, she was like sexually molesting me and just doing horrific things to me, like she'd burn me and like just crazy shit. And so that was really tough. And one day my dad finally, I tried kind of telling him, but when you're like 7 or 8 years old, 9 years old, it's a tough endeavor to really even embrace what that is, let
Yeah.
alone go up to your dad and be like, hey, this is happening. And he finally caught on to that there was some really dark shit happening, and he left her. And my sister and I were playing. We were out catching frogs by this creek by where my dad lived in this like kind of low income housing area that we grew up in. And I remember coming home and the screen door was open, and my dad was like the typical dad, like, "What are you trying to, get cool the whole summer, street down with the air conditioning? You're letting all the mosquitoes in, right?" Like he just,
Yeah.
so I just immediately went on high alert because the screen door was open, and when we walked in, that woman jumped out from behind the wall, and she had a huge knife, and she tried to. My sister was in front of me, and she tried to stab her, and I grabbed my sister and I threw her behind me, and she came at me, and just all of a sudden my dad came out of nowhere and grabbed her by the neck and all this stuff, and she went into like a psych ward after that because she was wanted to hit my dad and then kill herself. And so I was exposed to a lot of some pretty violent stuff that caused a lot of trauma in my younger years. My dad got sober when I was 11 and met his wife, still his third wife, but three times a charm. So my stepmom was an angel and came in and saved my dad's life and helped him through that and got him sober. And then life changed dramatically. I started to have a very different relationship with my father after that. And I see my mom on the weekends and all that kind of stuff. And I just really started to, like, when I was in my teens, even in early, like later elementary, I started to go wild because I just had so much bottled up trauma and like it was crazy. And so I started acting out a lot and very violent outbursts. And I grew up watching my dad basically react to everything with anger. And so anytime I felt fear or anything or anyone challenged me, it was always an explosion. And I was a really small kid, but I thought I was the size of the Incredible Hulk, I think. So I was always, in everybody's face. And then, I got beat up, or although I was bullied severely for a long time. And but so I went to, like, my dad had a lot of problems, like I said, and so I went to. By the time I was in grade 6, I had been at uh, 6 or 7 different schools already. Like we had moved
Wow.
around, like in the same city, but just
Mhm.
get evicted, move to another apartment, get evicted, move to. He couldn't get his shit together, and then I lived with my grandparents for a while, and there's all kinds of problems and in and outs and stuff with CFS and stuff. So like the Child Family Services. And but like I said, once he got it together and got sober, like life was better. But by that point, I had really lost control, and I just had so much anger and hate and for life and people. And I started drinking and doing drugs really early, like 11, 12. I was getting blackout drunk and, at bush parties and stuff and, awful. Right. And I was getting arrested and stealing and robbing and all kinds of stuff as a very early teenager. And so I ended up, my family just couldn't handle me anymore. And this child psychotherapist recommended that they just stopped letting me in the house. And so I ended up living on the streets for about 2 years as a teenager. And that was hard. Like I said, it gets very cold here and very hot.
Mhm.
So, finding somewhere warm to spend a winter night here was a terrifying prospect. There were a few nights that I almost died of hypothermia, freezing to death. I was rushed to a hospital one night because I was found out cold on a bus bench, like a transit bus bench outside. The cab driver had taken me, and they had to pump me my body full of warm saline solution, and try to revive me. And I had severe frostbite and all these different things. They thought they might have to amputate my feet, and because I was so frozen. And so I just was always exposed to so much stuff. And then when I got into my 20s, I was a menace to society. And I started getting involved with street gangs and then with biker gangs, and I kind of ran with that. But I lived this like dual life where I was like this normal guy that wanted to go to work and just be happy and funny, and then I just was extremely violent and psychotic. And it was just like this, it was like Jekyll and Hyde. And I was like, do I have like multiple personalities? Like, am I two different people? And I always felt like so guilty all the time. Like, I'd go psycho, I'd be at a bar and I'd be like blackout drunk and I'd fight like everyone. Like, there was no stopping me when I started. And I was on tons of steroids and everything, and so I just was like, I was unstoppable, man. Like, and then the next day I would just be so riddled with guilt and shame. And so I was like, I'm not your average psychopath or sociopath, because I would feel all these things that I really shouldn't have. And it just kind of added. And as I just realized looking back that I was just really depressed. I was just
Yeah.
riddled with depression, and I constantly did the opposite of what my heart told me to do my whole life. I never listened to that voice, whether you call it Holy Spirit or you call it your gut or you call it God or you call it your conscience, whatever you want to call it. I did not listen to it, man. I was like, whatever you tell me, the opposite. And
Yeah.
I lived my life like that. I was a train wreck my whole life, but I presented so well. I should have won an Academy Award for the best actor in life, because if you would have met me, I would solve the world's problems. I'd sit there in a fancy suit, tell you everything, teach you about stuff you never even thought you'd want to learn about, and you'd be happy about it. And then I'd go home and I'd sit there contemplating if I should take my life or not. And I did that for decades. And you know what? I got really successful in my late 30s and 40s, and it all went to my head, and my ego was the size of Jupiter, the planet. I was like, it just was, I don't know how I even could stand up. My head was so big. And it put me into a position where I lost everything. And I spiraled into this 2 year depression. And, I was drinking during the day at work, and just, you know, it was awful, man. And then I started getting these, fantasies about ending my life. It started kind of as a joke about it, or then I'd think about it maybe once a week. Then I was thinking about it 100 times a day. Then I was thinking about it like every 10 minutes, and planning out my funerals and what music I wanted there. Like, just complete delusion from, how far I spiraled with depression. And it all just compiled and suffocated me. And in the end, I felt completely alone. And the only future I saw was the same pain that I had felt my whole life. And it was a terrifying um, perspective to own, and one that there's no other one that I could foresee. So like I said, that led me up to that attempt. There was other attempts, like when I was 8, when I was getting tortured and stuff by my dad's second wife. I tried to hang myself, and I was unsuccessful in that. Which is a good thing. And again, like,
Yeah.
very happy that I was unsuccessful in my my last attempt. There was another time where I took bottles of sleeping pills, and then I was like chugging wine and ended up projectile vomiting it all up. So I ended up in the hospital and getting my stomach pumped, and just being like completely like a zombie for a week. But that was all. That kind of is the short version of the more negative and dark side of my life. Along there was a lot of beautiful and bright moments too. I was a very, very bipolar life. I would have vacations and beautiful times, and I loved being in nature, and I had all these incredible things, but it just was like my life was just like this, constantly up and down and out of control. So um it's funny that it took dying or almost dying to learn how to appreciate life. And I think that was the biggest wake up call for me, is when I pulled that trigger. What happened was my brain, this is what I believe. I mean, I'm not a neuroscientist, not yet. I'm working on it. But so the brain is an organ, your mind is your conscious organization of your thoughts, emotions, and everything going on. So the brain is doing the involuntary and voluntary work with everything in your body. So when I pulled that trigger, I believe that my brain shut down, ready to die. Like it went to do a shutdown so that, everything wouldn't go into whatever, but my consciousness stayed there. And so when I pulled this trigger, I don't know how long it was. It could have been a millisecond. It could have been 10 minutes. I don't know. Maybe I blacked out. But I went through this insane thing where I saw my entire life in like the fastest rewind, and then some pauses, like at special times or really bad times, and then all the way to my birth, and then fast forward all the way to that moment. And then when I did, it was like my brain was trying to it was like trying to start the circuit. And I saw these images and like weird stuff, like a pair of pants on fire, like me catching a frog as a child, a monarch butterfly, like all these different things. And none of them made sense to me at the time. But after I realized I wasn't dead, I remember taking a look behind me, and the wall was clean, wait. And I was just like, what's going on? Because I fully thought I was gone. I realized that these visions I had, I wrote them all down. And later, when I started writing all my stuff, like my life, all the feelings, the things I didn't like about myself, I created an autopsy on myself. Like I just diagnosed everything that was wrong with me and was making me ill. And all of a sudden I had this like crazy epiphany where all those weird images were tied into sort of like categories of these different parts of my life. So they became chapters in my first book, One Drop of Water. So for instance, there's a chapter called Liar, Liar, Pants on Fire. And that chapter is all about the lies I had told myself my whole life, that I wasn't good enough, that I lived in fear. And so I lied to compensate for everything, and like to your point earlier, where you're sort of talking about like, going to the 9 to 5 or never going after the things, it's all fear-based. And I realized that, and I had lied to myself forever. And that's what people do, is we continue to lie about, and get comfortable within those lies. We can call them excuses or dishonest negotiations, whatever makes you feel good about it, I guess. But we lie to ourselves and say we can't do that because we're worried about what people think, or we're worried about what people say, or it's not going to work out, or what if it does work out, then what? Like, so all those visions became like chapters in my first book. So in my first book, this One Drop of Water, there's a chapter called The Monarch Butterfly Effect. And so when I wrote my first book, this is my second book, The Monarch Butterfly Effect. So this is an extension from one of the chapters in my first book. And this one's all about transformation, going through a mental health metamorphosis. So in this, I cite the monarch butterfly's life cycle as a metaphor for our stages of mental health. We're a little tiny egg at first. It's a belief. We have to grow. We become a caterpillar. We consume and grow and do all these things. And then we go into this chrysalis where it's like introspection and darkness. And we have to isolate and really go do the hard work. And then we emerge this beautiful butterfly. But the job isn't done then, because then we have to go pollinate and do all these different things. So we have to spread and educate and that. And so when I wrote my first book, it was all those chapters are different visions that I saw when I guess I thought I was dead. And so out of the 19 chapters in my first book, 17 of them will become their own book. So this is the first one of 17. If I can write that many, it's a lot of work writing books, and it will drive you absolutely insane. But so after my books took off and got successful, my first book, things were going really good. And my dad had been sick off and on for a couple decades. He had a quadruple bypass, open heart surgery, all this stuff, and had all kinds of problems and complications. So he was in and out of the hospital. Then he got diabetes, and he had this vascular dementia. So he would go spouts where he'd forget to do his insulin and just be whacked and all this stuff. So, anyways, he gets really sick, and then he gets diagnosed with stomach cancer. And they're like, at first it was just a little polyp that they found, and they were going to take a little tube down his throat, laser it, cauterize it, end of story. And a month later, when they went to do that, they couldn't do it because his whole stomach was a block of cancer. So he had like this turbo cancer. And so within like a week of that, he died. And I just started writing this book, The Monarch Butterfly Effect. And like we talked about briefly, like my dad was my fucking hero, man, like my best friend, my mentor, Superman, everything. And so it was really hard for me to keep writing and doing anything for a bit. And so 3 weeks later, my stepson's father dies of a fentanyl overdose. So our house got real dark. I was just getting through, like, just trying, like, I'd gone through sort of the denial stage and was being like this huge, like, support system for my sisters and for my stepmom and for everyone else. And then, my son's dad passes away in this horrific fashion. And so, at the time he's like, 19 or 20. And, so my grieving had to switch. And so it was to go down to help him. And so we had to go through some stuff. It was tough. And, it took a lot out of me for sure. I mean, losing your dad if you're close with your dad, is the hardest thing in the world. There's nothing, there's no book, there's no pill, there's no amount of alcohol that will fix that. And, but, the strategies that I had created and the philosophies and ideologies that I created for myself in my first book that guided me through my depression and healed me from it, I started to utilize those as a way to get through this. And about 9 months later, in late August, my dad had passed September 30th. And so almost a year later, August 28th, I was riding my Harley on the highway out here. I was going about 110 kilometers an hour. So I don't know what that is in miles for you guys, maybe like 80 miles an hour, something like that, or whatever. And they were doing some road work, and they had left this horrific patch of asphalt. And I hit this thing, and my front end snapped, and I launched, and I flew for 40 feet. And then I rolled for 355 feet down the highway with my motorcycle flipping over right behind me, smashing into pieces. And I'm a pretty smart guy, and I've studied physics. And I was like, inertia is not my friend right now, and concrete is not forgiving.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, I'm going to die. Like I am going to die right now. If at best I'm going to be a quadriplegic if I don't die. There's no way I'm surviving this. And I tell you, man, I again, it was like this flash of life and all this crazy stuff. And I hear this voice in my head, and it just says, "You're not done yet." And then everything just went back into real life, and I'm flipping around. And I'll tell you, the worst sound in the world is your body at 100 kilometers an hour, 80 miles an hour, flipping off concrete, bouncing uncontrollably, dude. Like, it was horrific percussion. And so I finally stopped moving, and I'm lying there, and I was wearing a full face helmet, and I wasn't like geared up in leather and all that kind of stuff. I was wearing jeans, boots, and like a flannel shirt. And so I'm lying there and I open my eyes. I'm like, okay, I'm alive. And then I'm terrified to move. I'm freaking out, like to move my hands or my feet, because if they don't move, I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know if it's vanity. I don't know if it's what it is, but I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to live as being paralyzed. I couldn't grasp the concept. So eventually I took like this, like breath of air, sort of like you would if you were like drowning, and finally came to the surface. And then tried to move my feet and they moved. And I was like, okay, I can move my legs. So I'm like, that's good news. I move my hands. I'm like, okay, good news. I sit up and I look down and my arms are just covered in blood and skin's ripped off. And this wrist is like the wrong way this way. This elbow is the size of like a thigh. My jeans are shredded. There's blood all over my back and legs. And like, I take my helmet off. I look at this thing. It's matte black. So it kind of shows everything. That's why I say that. And there's not even a speck of dust it never touched the pavement once. Like a complete miracle, man. Like, I mean, I was flipping like, I was a cannonball shooting down that highway. And like, I don't know how, but my head never touched. And, so I just sat there and I was a little bit pissed off. I'm like, you're telling me I just went through all that and like, I'm okay. And then and the crazy, I just bought that Harley on August 1st. I had it for 28 days. I had been looking for that bike for a year and a half. I was so pissed off. And so then I stand up and all these cars are coming on and they're like, no, don't move. Called an ambulance. And I'm like, no, it's cool. I'm going to walk home and have dinner. And, I was in complete shock. My back was like this big. I look like Quasimodo, like Hunchback of Notre Dame. And they're like, dude, like you have to go to the hospital. Like there's no way you should be alive right now. And I'm like, that's fine. It's fine. And I go look at my motorcycle and it's just in pieces everywhere. And I was so mad. And so I thought that there's a defect in the front end of my bike, but one of the guys that was following me in a truck said I hit this like big huge patch on the highway. So he went back and took pictures of it for me and then showed me, and I was so mad that I like some dude just didn't finish his job and like flatten out the pavement, you know what I mean? So anyways, now I'm in the hospital and I have internal bleeding from my heart into my stomach from the impact. My wrist is destroyed. My elbow they're trying to drain fluid out of it. It's so big and smashed up. And I'm strapped to a cervical collar and a hardboard, right? Because they still think my spine's compromised. And I had to pee so bad, man. All I can remember is like, I got to pee so bad and I can't. And then they run me through these CT scans and they give me an angiogram where they shoot dye into your groin. And they're like, this may make you feel like you got to pee your pants. And I'm like, no. Like I already do. I don't want that. I'm like, I don't want to do this, man. Like, I'm fine. I'm telling you. So anyways, I was like the big comedy thing for me there, and, but anyways, I ended up walking out of that hospital on my own. And, I had to face again, the PTSD from that accident. I saw it in my mind over and over and dreamt about it and like horrific nightmares for months. And my body was so beat up, and mentally, man, it was tough. And so again, I just kept applying all the principles and disciplines that I created for myself out of my first book. And, you know what? I couldn't write. I was in a cast here and up to my thumbs. And that's so I couldn't type, I couldn't write. I didn't want to like use a stick with like what am I supposed to do? I guess I could have used like voice recognition software, but anyways, I finally get past that, and then I'm like, okay, I got to finish this book. But those are the two hardest things I've ever had to go through. But what it did is it provided me with the story for this book. Yeah. Because I went through two things that would have derailed me 1,000,000% in my old life. I would have been drinking, fighting, hurting myself, hurting other people, being angry, depressed, the whole thing. And I never once went back to any of those things. And it was because of a model I built for myself called the Transformation Triangle. And this is now I go to schools and teach it to kids. And I go into workplaces and organizations and help teach it to their staff in a way to like balance out your mental health when you're in a crisis, or you're unstable, or you just want to change a habit. And so it fortified everything I believed, and I was able to write this book about it and turn it into this guide to offer everybody. And so it's brought me to this incredible place. And I love what I do, and I love talking about it, and I love sharing stories, and I love meeting people like you, and having conversations and getting in front of kids or getting in front of adults. Because you know what, like, it doesn't matter what we go through. Everybody's got different circumstances and experiences, but there's only so many feelings and emotions. So we're all tied into the same things by thought, emotion, feeling, right? And so if you're honest and you're raw and you're vulnerable and you're authentic and genuine in your approach to anything, people are always going to resonate with you and whatever it is you are, attempting to offer. And so, on a point you talked about earlier too, for me, one of the things that's made it so consistent for me to be able to do the things I do is because of the service of giving to others or giving back. Like, I volunteer at homeless shelters. I take kids I work with to feed people at homeless shelters. I do all kinds of different things. I teach boxing to kids in the hood that, normally would never get to have that opportunity. I take them on these nature expeditions and teach them about wildflowers and natural medicines and things that are part of their culture. And it's the most, for me, it keeps me humble, and it keeps me healing. And the last thing I'll say, because I've been talking for about 14 hours here in a row, but the last thing I'll say is my approach in both my books and my philosophy that I talk every time I speak in front of someone is that I approach mental health just like I do physical health. And I'll say this: imagine you got hurt. Okay. So you can get hurt physically, you can get hurt mentally, emotionally, right? So what happens if you say you hurt your arm really bad, it's got a big cut, maybe your arm's broken, all these things. What do you do? So you probably go to a doctor, and the doctor is going to take a look at it and say, okay, we need to create a treatment plan. So, we got to do these things. And so this will help heal that wound, right? If we don't listen to that doctor or whatever specialist or whatever you go see, what happens? Well, that wound or that thing that doesn't heal properly might get infected. That infection then spreads, and then it starts to break down other parts of your arm, and things get really bad, right? If you don't take care of it. Well, mental health is the exact same thing. So we get an emotional or mental wound, something breaks us or something crushes us, whatever it is, right? If we don't approach it the same way, and we got to heal this thing. So how do we do that? We got to create a treatment plan. So how do you do that? Well, we got to repair this part, because what happens again if we don't start to work on, say, we have a broken heart? What happens? Well, that becomes infected and starts to spread into all the other parts of our life, right? And so it's just like physical health. And so if we have a wound and we don't treat it properly, it's going to get infected. It's going to turn into disease. And so mental health is the same thing. What happens is mental health, we don't treat, depression or anxiety or PTSD or an eating disorder. Well, it spreads and becomes an illness, right? And then that illness it can come to the point where it can take your life, right? Like, a lot of eating disorders have one of the highest death rates out of any mental disorder, and it's scary stuff.
Didn't know that.
But again, so you have someone like me who is super depressed and has violent tendencies and all these different things. Well, I tried to eradicate my depression by, trying to kill it, essentially, right? And, in Canada, the statistics tell us that 76% of all suicides are male, which is terrifying. That one of the highest populations is 10 to 14-year-old boys, specifically an Indigenous demographic here, which is, again, heartbreaking. In Canada, it's about 12 people a day, about 4,000 or 5,000 people a year. Now, this is a modest number because a lot of overdoses and different things like that aren't accounted for as suicide. And a lot of families don't want that to be a public record, right? Because they're embarrassed, the shame, all the different things. And so it's crazy. But in the world, I mean, someone's taken their life every 27 seconds.
Yeah.
like 1 million people a year are taking their lives, and it's because they're not treating these wounds to fix them or to heal from them. People are taking drugs, and that just is just as like a support system or like a weak band-aid, really, that does nothing. You have to heal the things that hurt you. And so the biggest thing I talk about is going back to, what happened to you, and removing the feelings and just looking at the facts. Facts don't lie. Our feelings lie to us all the time. Feelings tell us stories. We make up stories. We attach memories that aren't true sometimes. But when we look at the facts of what happened and remove ourselves from them emotionally, that's when we can do the work. And that's when we can start to heal. So I'll leave it there because, again, I just think I just went on a monologue for about a day and a half there. So,
Well, to Jason's TED Talk, guys. I'm joking.
yeah, exactly.
No, you know what? It's freaking awesome, right? Because the one thing that I've been thinking this entire time is you are the image of resilience. And because the average person will hear like one or two things that you've experienced and think like, God, just craziness, that I know a person that experienced something similar or whatever the case might be, not thinking anything else of it. But then as you continue to go further, but like, hold on, there's more. You're like, but wait, there's more. And they're like, dude, listen, what a life, you know what I mean? Like, and you got so much more in it to go, and like, I'm just sitting here, I'm thinking, gosh, like, I'll tell you, man, personally, I have my own stories of resilience, and I've had people tell me, man, you're a pretty resilient person. I'm like, yeah, I appreciate it, whatever. But hearing your story, I'm like, gosh, that would have been considered a good day, and but it's awesome, man, because again, this is the vulnerability that we were talking about in the beginning, is where more men need to do, because you can feel the release that it gives a person, especially again, men who are, when they're able just to let it all out, right? We have all this jammed up and packed in us. It's and because we're told we're supposed to. I think about what you were mentioning when you said, you know people would see you go to work, and the person you were there when you're working, solving the world's problems, was the completely different person you were when you went home and you sat there debating if you would going to take your own life. And I thought to myself, like, this is the average man's dilemma, if you know what I mean. Like, not every man is going through to that extreme, but like, this is the dilemma of being a man, where you sit there and you're able to put on this facade to the world, but then when you're in your own comfort of your own home or your own space, you're just like, what have I accomplished? What am I bringing to the world? What am I bringing to my family? Am I really doing what I'm supposed to? But what another thing that really popped out to me is it's all these things that happen to you, and to where you are now, or you even questioning, like, I have no idea how I'm alive, right? It's by the grace of God that I think that really is to show you, like, hey, he has so much more planned for you. And you know it's always the individuals who have to go through unfortunate events, that where you're just like, but they have so much experience to offer, right? And I'm sure at 25 you probably didn't imagine, you would be this person where you're like, let me tell you about all the crap that I was doing, and how I was really just, again, forgive me for using this word, but a degenerate, right? Like, let me just tell you. And being able to offer that up to younger people is magnificent, because young people, they see what the culture tells them. They see what's on TV, they see what's on the rap videos, they see what's on, down the street, whatever the case. They see this culture around them that tells them that they're not cool, they're not good enough, unless they come from this, unless they do this, unless they have this, they get these things. And it's a consumerism of things and facade. No one can be who they really are, because the culture tells us, no, 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 no. In order to fit in, you need to be this person. And for people to really just see that and hear it from someone like yourself, I know, because especially for me myself, that is to hear that and to think like, okay, oh, got it. That's real life. That's real life. Me worrying about, am I going to have this awesome job when I graduate college, and I'm so stressed about midterms, right? Like those things are small on a small thing on a grander scale, where you're like, oh, okay, perspective. That's what it's all about. It's about perspective. And once your perspective changes, you're like, got it. I can see now where I was putting all this energy into this thing, or that was going on in my life, when if I would have just took a step back, I would have been different. But I wanted to ask you, because I think this is a perfect place to kind of come, that we can come to a conclusion here. Is people hear that you try to commit suicide on several different occasions, but especially, in 2019, where you put a gun in your mouth, right?
Mm.
And most people, you know, would be like, "How is this dude still here? He probably didn't pull the trigger," or whatever the case might be, right? Um, but it happened, right? The gun jammed, by the grace of God, and all these things happen, and you're sitting there just like shocked. So I have two questions in particular that I think that will help people, especially if they're getting to that point in their life where they think like this is the best way to go, right?
Yeah.
Or they meaning they want to take their own life, not meaning this is the best thing to do, but they want to take their own life. And that first question is, in that moment when the gun jammed and the realization set in that it wasn't, you weren't successful, obviously, but there was, I imagine there was some happiness in there. um what was that feeling? What true genuine feeling? What were you thinking, right? Was there a smile, like, oh my gosh, like, this didn't work? Or was there just like, was it anger? Or what were you feeling in that moment? Because I think a lot of people want to hear like, okay, let me put it this way. Uh, there's this. I think it's the bridge in San Francisco. I think it's the bridge in San Francisco. A lot of people jump from it to commit suicide, and those who survive, they say the moment they jump, the moment their feet leave the bridge, they instantly regret. Regret doing it. So for you though, what was that? What was that feeling that you had when you kind of came to realization like this didn't work?
Um, it's a really good question and a really powerful one that definitely um I enjoy answering, and I don't get asked it often enough.
Mhm.
So at first I was a little bit in shock, like I had explained. I fully expected to die. Um, and then I was quite angry because I had failed at my mission, and failure was the actual driving component. So many failed relationships, whether it was work, friends, family, with myself. Failure at everything. And that was one of the main contributors to what led me down to the absolute bottom of my life. So there's some anger for sure, and then there was a bit of a moment where I was like almost I was like, wow, what an ironic slap in the face from God or the universe, right?
Yeah.
Because you're gonna make me fail at the one thing that is basically foolproof not to fail at.
Right.
Yeah. And so there's a little bit of a like a ha ha ha, and
Yeah.
then honestly, man, I laid down on the floor and I cried so fucking hard. I probably cried 40 years worth of pain out of my body. And I felt so much regret because I started to realize how selfish that was and what that would have done to my father at the time, who was alive, to my mother, my stepmother, to my sisters, to their kids, my nieces and nephews, to my friends. And I had blocked all that out, before that. And so I was overwhelmed with like a tsunami wave of so many emotions. I literally was in the fetal position, like bawling my face off until I passed out. And then I remember waking up, and because leading up to that, I had drank a ton of bourbon, and I was taking painkillers and sleeping pills and anything I could to numb my brain because, my consciousness was trying to talk me out of it the whole time. And so
Mhm.
I felt awful physically, like I was very, brain fog and groggy and, hungover, and I hadn't drank water or eaten in days. And, I was doing cocaine and all this crazy stuff. Excuse me. So, but initially, yeah, it was anger at the fact that I had failed. And then, like I said, there was this brief kind of moment of almost like a smirk and a laugh, like, and then, like I said, just a tsunami of the most powerful emotions I've ever felt in my life. Everything I've suppressed, everything that I buried, everything just came pouring out, man, in the form of tears. And I was like convulsing crying. And I had been ignoring phone calls and texts from people for days. There's a few people that were quite concerned that knew me well because I was always the social butterfly. I was always, you invited me over, I was there. And literally to the last couple of days before that suicide attempt, I was out there trying to make everybody laugh, everyone else happy, do all the things I always did, right? I was, and never myself. And yeah, so when I finally kind of woke up and got through like the foggy state I was in, I sat in the realization that of what all the thing what I could have done
Yeah.
and what could have happened, and then I was kind of taken over with um, a feeling I would call maybe the Holy Spirit or something kind of coming into me and comforting me. I was all alone and I couldn't tell anyone or talk to anyone about it at that time because I just was so screwed up about everything and that. And it was right before Christmas, and so I had to hold myself together for a couple months and be around everybody for Christmas and my family. And I still was so depressed and lost and all the I hadn't really worked on myself yet. And it was after Christmas that I finally snapped and was just like, dude, you got to fight for your life, man. You got to do it for your family. You got to do it for your friends and do it for yourself. And then the whole new perspective, like you were mentioning earlier, came on and life changed like that. So
Man, well, I will tell you, I do believe it's the Holy Spirit because the Holy Spirit is referred to as the Comforter. And so, gosh, that's powerful. It's in, it's hard to imagine. I a personal story. Last year in March time frame, had a friend, and he he was successful at taking his own life in the same manner in which you tried. And My commander and my first sergeant, they're like supervisors, military terms. Uh, they and his direct supervisor, a matter of fact, also, they had to go. They went to his house because no one had heard from him, and he was staying in a trailer at the time. And they found him, and my commander, man, she's awesome. She's a legit person, and but like she was never the same person afterwards. You could tell there was a lot of forced moments of like getting through jokes or trying to joke, trying to be the person that she was before she saw that, and his family was devastated, and it was one of the hardest times for me in the military because at the time I'm on a detail where we're doing I'm and for funerals, so I'm on funeral detail. So me and several other soldiers are responsible going to the funerals, presenting the flag to the next of kin, um, carrying the casket, and doing all these things. So I'm on this detail, and this detail is 4 months long, and so in the middle of this detail, to get this call that, hey, Baker has taken his own life. I couldn't. I, I I thought I was being lied to. You know what I mean? Because he was the guy that was just everyone wanted to talk to. Everyone he was. They called him Uncle. Uncle B, because he was an older guy, but he was just kind of like the dude you could talk to, and it never seemed like anything ever affected him, right? But he was going through some stuff, but he still it seemed like nothing ever affected him. And then, just to have to go through that, where you're just like, he's not here anymore. And I know one of my friends, man, Lopez, if he ever hears this, he Lopez with him were close, really close, and it hit him really hard. And I know, it's difficult because you just wish you could have told that person, like, hey, I'll give you a hug. Like, you just need, if you just need a hug, I'll give that to you, right? Like, if you just need someone a shoulder to cry on, I'll be that. Just tell me, because that's truthfully, we we want you here. You know what I mean? Like, that's what people want. They want you here, and forget all the crap that's going on. If we're disagreeing or whatever, they can forget all of that. That's noise. That's noise. What I want at the end of the day is to be able to. It's like this. If I'm arguing with my brother, I would never think, "Hey, I wish my brother was here." No, I'd be so upset, right? Because truthfully, it's like, who am I going to argue with tomorrow? You know what I mean? Like, as stupid and selfish as it sounds, but it's like that's just kind of like our thing, that's our banter, and it just means a lot to me. And I would never want him to go away. None of the words that I would say I would never want him just to go away, right? And I'll say this, and this one of the things that I taught I was teaching my daughter. Words have power. And when I was telling her this, she was being mean to her sister, and her younger sister, and she thought it was okay. And I was telling her, I was like, no, you need to understand how your words have power. I said, you need to, and I'll give you an example. I was like, how did God create the word? How did God create the heaven and the earth? And she goes, what do you mean? I was like, he spoke it into existence. I was like, so think about it this way. He gave us the power to speak, and his word, what he spoke it and it happened. I was like, your words have power. So you need to understand that when you say things to people, your words hold power, and you cannot just say them frivolously, like as if there's no consequences. And so, when I say that is, when you're talking to people, when you're speaking with, whether you disagree with, it doesn't matter. You remember that your words have power. Your words they have so much power. And I would say my final question to you here, or I have two questions, but my final question regarding your experience here is, I think you have an unsuccessful attempt, and one of the hardest things I imagine is being able to acknowledge, like, this is something that you did. I don't know if you can hear my dog in the background, but sure enough, he's going ham, right? As I told you. But I imagine the hardest part after that is having to tell somebody, but like, not even just like, okay, you go tell a counselor, like, hey, this has happened, right? But you have to tell someone that you love, right?
Yeah.
Someone that's really close to you. And I want to, I think this is better. Would be good for the audience as well. But, what was that first time like when you told your dad that, hey, like, this is what happened. This is what I did. It didn't work. Like, what was that? What was that like? And what happened there?
Well, I didn't tell my dad till quite a bit later.
Mm.
My dad, like I said, his health was quite compromised, and he wasn't always 100% there. Mentally, he had a lot of struggles because of dementia and he was on so much medications and stuff. So basically, I kind of told him when I launched my book, I said, hey, Dad, I wrote a book, and I tried to take my life, a couple years ago. And this is about all the things that basically led me to that decision. I told him, I said, I talk about you in the book, and I hope you're not mad at me, but I had to face some truths, and there's stuff in there that I've never been able to ever talk about my whole life, and I had to get it out. And so he was fairly supportive in his way. My dad was was a very unique man in his in his regard to humor and to his personal state on things. So he's quite stoic at times. And so he read my book and told me that there was a couple things he'd like to disagree with me on. And I said, I'm sure there is.
Such a dad moment
Yeah,
right there.
yeah,
Let
yeah.
me tell you
And
how you're
so,
wrong,
yeah,
and we're
I'd
going
like
to
to tell
correct
you how
this.
you were wrong about this. And so I kind of just left it and we had to laugh about it or whatever. But the first person I told after was my close friend Jay. And he was actually the guy that it was a Monday morning at 9:45 a.m. when I attempted my life. I had this weird time in my head and I had this whole thing. And the day before, I was supposed to go meet him, and he's a firefighter and a bunch of other firefighters to watch, I think hockey or something at a sports bar and all this stuff. And I didn't even acknowledge and text him and all that. And so he knew something was wrong, and he was phoning and phoning. And so he was the first person that, at first I just said, "Hey man, I'm sorry, I've just been really tired and not myself and all that." And eventually we went to a Winnipeg Jets hockey game together, and we were driving, and I knew it was coming. Like I just knew, I could tell on him that he he knew. And so he pulled the car over, and he said, "Don't you ever do that again, man." And just it's crazy because I can still feel the exact horrifying feelings of what ending your life feels like. And in his way, he just letting me know that he cared. He's like, "I called you, I texted you, man. I told you could come to my house and live there if you needed." And I ignored all of it. I disregarded all attempts of people trying to help me. And but when he did that, like it was just the way he said it was like, cut through all the bullshit, and it was just straight talk, real love, brother to brother. And he's like, "Don't you ever do that again." And it wasn't about me attempting. He was like, "Don't you ever, never, like, come talk to me first. Don't you ever exclude me out of that path again. Like, don't you ever exclude me out of that path again. Like, I am there with you. I am your friend. I'm your brother. You come talk to me first." And so that was super powerful. And then, we went to a hockey game and with, 20,000 people in the stands, and I had to pull my stuff together and be like, "Yeah, let's go." My eyes
Now
were
let's
all
go
red
cheer
from
for hockey. Be
crying.
prepared.
Yeah, everybody thinks I look like either smoked a bag of marijuana or like I'm, like literally my eyes are all red, bloodshot from crying. And, so it's a pretty funny experience after that. We still joke about it, but, and he's one of my most solid friends. And so he was the first one that I actually talked to. But like my dad was literally a year later. I think I may have told my sisters, but even I just didn't want to burden people still. I'm still in that mindset where, you know, where most men are, where we feel like we're a burden if we tell anyone that we're hurting or we are sad or we are lonely or we're broken. We don't want to burden other people with it. And, it comes from our boys don't cry mentality that we were brought up with. And, you just work through it and you power through it and you just work through it and you power through it. And, if there's anything I can share with anyone that's feeling despair right now or is feeling lost and is having thoughts of ending your life, the biggest thing I would say to you is please talk to someone. Please reach out to your brothers, man. Talk to a friend, talk to your lover, talk to anybody. I don't care. Talk to a homeless person on a bus bench if that's the easiest way to do it. And you're not alone. There are way more people than you can imagine that have been exactly where you are, and they would help you like this because they know that feeling. I help anyone I can that's there, and it's it is a um it is a you know it is a permanent solution to a temporary problem if you
Yeah.
end your life. And I know that sometimes that temporary can feel like it's going to be forever and it's suffocating and all those. I've been there. Like I was there. So I get it, but I'm just saying, please please reconsider. Please, even if it's one more day, just talk to someone and get through that next day. And you never know what can be on the other side of it. So,
Man, this has been such a impactful episode for me, and when I release it, I know it'll be impactful for the audience as well, because you know we go through life so carelessly at times, where we forget that we're human beings, right? Because we like to focus on what makes us different from one another, but like we forget that, like, hey, we're flesh and blood, and we have different life experiences, and you never know just like what someone's going through. And so, when someone asks you, like, hey, how you doing, and you get the standard answer like, oh yeah, another day, oh yep, right, you know it doesn't that's just a standard BS answer, just like, hey, I don't want to talk. I think that we need to start being more honest with each other and be like, man, I'm having a hard time, right? Because we, gosh, how many lives can be saved? How many lives can be impacted by just someone simply saying, like, hey man, I care. Like, I may not know you, but I care.
yeah.
I have this experience. So early on in my military career, I have this young man who went AWOL, absent without leave, and I think he was gone for years. I don't know. I think a couple years or so. Anyway, he ended up being found. They had to come bring him back, and I think there was some other thing. There were some other charges that were going on, in which led to the reason why he went AWOL. Anyway, at the time, I'm responsible for printing new ID cards out for service members, and so he comes in, but he's in an orange jumpsuit and he's shackled at his hands and his ankles, and I remember, like, oh wow, I've never experienced this before in my life. So I remember him coming in, and I'm a talker, so he sits down. And the MPs are the military police. They're stationed at different entry points, extra points, to make sure he doesn't try to run away. Which you can't run away if in those shackles like that. You're not running anywhere. But anyway, and he's sitting there with me, and in this process, there's this moment where it's just kind of limbo as the card's being made. So it's like awkward if you don't say anything, because we're in like a closet sized room. So it's like, I need to talk to this person, or it's just weird for all of us, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm not even, I wasn't even thinking about it in the sense at the time, but I remember I just sitting there talking to him. And I said, hey man, I was like, but how are you doing? And this dude just starts breaking down, and I'm like, oh gosh, what did I do? I was like, that was a stupid question. I should know how he's doing. Look at him. He's in shackles right now. And I'll never forget this moment, but he looks at me and he goes, I've been, people see me in shackles, see me in whatever the case might be. He goes, but you're the first person in 2 weeks that have asked me how I'm doing. Yeah. And I said, oh, I mean, I said, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to seem, inconsiderate situation. He goes, no. He goes, you were the first person to ask me how I'm doing. Yeah. In 2 weeks. Everyone has seen me and avoided me, doesn't want to talk to me. But you asked me. He goes, honestly, he goes, I'm okay. I understand that there's consequences to my actions, but for the most part, I'm good. I'm just happy because, my family's taken care of. I talked to my parents, and it was in that moment that I realized that realization of, like, oh my goodness, how easy, how simple it is just to talk to, when you're just remember you're talking to a human being. Forget everything again. Forget the noise that's going on. You're talking to a human being. And that young man right there sat there and looked at me. And when I asked him that question, heard for the first time, someone actually cares about how I'm doing. They see this, but he still cares about how I'm doing. Yeah. And, when he left there, he was like, hey man, have a good day. And I said, hey man, look, I know you got a situation. I said, I pray that you have for the best potential outcome for you. And I pray that you have the best day. He's like, appreciate it, man. You have a good one. Yeah. But that moment right there was one of those moments for me where I was like, we can never forget how to treat one another. And one last point here is, I was talking about my a friend of mine, Baker, and his like one of his good friends, Lopez, and then you mentioned your friend Jay. Which shout out to Jay, man, because that dude, look, legit friend right there.
Oh yeah,
I don't know him, but he sounds freaking awesome, right?
amazing dude.
It sounds like a friend that would be cool because he put you through an emotional roller coaster like that, and he was like, "Now dry your tears. We got to go cheer this hockey team on,
Yeah.
and I better not see you over there crying. I better see you screaming your life, But it made me think of a verse, and I'm sure you've heard it, and most people have heard of it, but it's in Proverbs 27:17, as iron sharpens iron, so a friend sharpens a friend, and you know I think when it comes to talking about mental health, one of the biggest things is you have to first and foremost, it's important who you surround yourself with. But believe it or not, in any situation, you may feel like you don't have a friend in a close person. I guarantee you there's always a person in your life that if you just called them, you just spoke to them, said, "Hey, look, life sucks. Doesn't seem like friends." They guarantee you they'd be like, "Oh man, I don't care about that stuff. I care about you." And you know, I have close friends, right? Like I can count on my fingers how many like my friends, right? And for me, that's an accomplishment because I'm not a person. I'm an extrovert, but I'm not a person who's like has to like 50 plus friends. But I have this one best friend of mine where I know if anything happened, I can call him and he'll talk to me and ironically enough he's a firefighter as well. And so he's legit, and it's just one of those things where I know he'll hear me, and I know he'll be like, "Hey man, like listen," he'll tell me what I need, right? He'll tell me what I need to hear in those moments of where I'm just like life sucks and everything. But my point is, you have friends. Like you guys have friends. You have people in your life. If you absolutely tell me you don't have any friends, fine. Get a hold of Jason. He will respond. Listen, I messaged, like when I emailed him, y'all, I'm not gonna lie to you. It was late. I know how late it was.
Yeah.
I know how late it was. But he answered me the next day, and like reach out, okay? Just reach out, right?
Yeah.
And reach out to me. Holy crap. I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook. Reach out. I don't care. On YouTube, you tell me, you comment below, reach out. Listen, I'll respond as fast as I can. But the best place to go, the best thing to do is the 988, the suicide hotline. If you're feeling that way, like I genuinely want you just to just try it out, right? Like just dial the number, dial 988, and just speak to someone to better help you in that moment, because we can't afford to lose more people just because when they feel like they don't have anybody. But Jason, you have been a phenomenal guest. Like I said, this is truthfully has been one of the most impactful conversations that I've ever had on the podcast, because I've never met someone who's been through so much, but who has been able to embody resilience and then have the boldness and the confidence to come out and say, like, yeah, I did that. Look, this is what I did. And these were some of the consequences. This is what I went through. But let me tell you, you can get through it. And like that to me is that's God using you. That is God using you. That is a prime example of God using you. Guys, encourage you, check out his books. They will be in the description below. I want y'all to go check him out, buy his book, leave a review for his book. That's one of the biggest things for authors.
Sure.
I know.
Yeah.
Leave a review, people. Don't just read the book and be like, cool, got it. No, read the book and leave a review. It's freaking phenomenal. And again, Jason, it means so much for you to come on here and just tell your story and just and sit with me and allow me to listen, man. I appreciate it. I really do.
Yeah. Well, thank you to you. And like I said, it goes right back on you, like listening to you speak, and it's a beautiful dialogue when you have, like I said, the experiences and scenarios can be different, right? But we're all connected
Yeah.
regardless of that. And it doesn't matter that you're in a nice warm Texas and it's fairly warm. It's summer up here, so it's good right now. But
Yeah.
we're thousands of miles apart, but it's like we're in the same room chatting right now, right?
Yeah.
And it's been a true honor and a privilege for me to be a guest on your show. And I hope our conversation sparks some other conversations among people watching. And like I said, you know, you can always reach out to me. You've said it. You're ready to go too. And you know, I believe that these kind of conversations are what can change the world.
Yeah.
It takes, you know, one person at a time, but you know, one mind changed and then that mind opens another and another. Well, you're creating a waterfall effect that before you know it, there's a huge, powerful thing happening, and it becomes a movement.
Yeah.
And we need a movement in men's mental health specifically. I mean, all human beings for sure. But as a man, I can tell you, and I mean, you can testify too, obviously, that there needs to be more. And so God bless you for what you're doing, Q.
Thank you.
And hopefully we can do this again soon.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm sure we could come up with lots of stuff to talk about. So.
Oh yeah, listen, trust me. I was taking notes. I don't know if you could tell. I was reaching forward with my laptop. I was taking notes because I was like, I need to remember this.
Yeah.
But I definitely think we should do another episode, because I definitely want to kind of ping in on a few other things that you said in your life that I think that definitely would help and impact people. But again, Jason, thanks for coming on, guys. As usual, subscribe to the channel, please. If you want us to support the channel, that's the best, and that's the free way to support the channel. If you want to support us monetarily, then go to mediocredads.net. You can go get you some merchandise available now. And as usual, guys, this is how we always end. But remember that being mediocre is a choice, and you have to refuse to be mediocre every single day. That is all we got. Mediocre Dads out.